This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Welcome to Uncorking a Story, the podcast that introduces you to the rich world of storytellers who share their personal journeys, creative processes, and the stories behind their stories, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and I'm thrilled to be part of your writing journey. If you're an aspiring writer, a literary enthusiast, or simply someone who believes in the transformative power of words, you've come to the right place. Every week, we'll pop the cork on the world of successful storytellers and give you a healthy pour of inspiration, insight, and empowerment. My mission is to help writers like you realize your full potential through the transformative and therapeutic power of writing. Whether you're just starting your literary voyage or looking to refine your craft, I'm here to provide you with the knowledge, inspiration, and encouragement you need to embark on your own storytelling adventure. So, are you ready to uncork your story and let your creativity flow? Uncorking a Story is about to begin. Sit back, relax, and let the transformative magic of storytelling whisk you away. Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Philip Cioffari is a novelist, short story writer, playwright, and filmmaker. He joins me today on Uncorking a Story to discuss his career and new novel entitled Night and Its Longings. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Philip.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you here, Philip, and I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
I started writing probably when I was 9 or 10. I used to write, in those days, I was writing little cowboy stories, little mystery stories. I grew up at a time when, radio programs, radio narratives were in vogue. So my early, entertainment was listening to things like The Shadow and the Green Hornet and Dick Tracy and Lone Ranger and Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. um, so I think that was pretty influential because when you're listening to radio drama, you have to create everything in your head. They give you a few sound cues. You have the voices and you have like footsteps walking, a door opening, but you need to create the visuals yourself. I mean, it happens automatically as you're listening. You're not thinking about that. But I think that that was one of the things that maybe got me interested in writing too, is creating the pictures that go along with the sounds. So I started then, and I would make little picture books. I would staple them together. I would draw a picture for the cover. I would do, I do all those kinds of silly kid things. And then I started writing for the newspaper in high school and in college, and then I went to graduate school. And as soon as I graduated from college, I started writing every day, basically.
Interesting. What was that first career after college?
I was teaching. In fact, I still teach. I teach for Gotham Writers, which is a private company in New York. I teach in person, but they do online classes as well. And I teach fiction writing. I taught for a while at university level fiction writing. But yeah, my first job was at William Patterson University in New Jersey, about 30 minutes from Manhattan.
I'm curious. You mentioned, starting when we started talking about, radio dramas, and it's funny how like what's old is new again because, right, we're doing this as a podcast, of course, but some of the biggest podcasts out there are those true crime podcasts, and really they're nothing more than like old fashioned radio dramas. The way the storytelling is done.
Yeah. No, and in fact, for a while in Greenwich Village, there was a bookshop that sold mysteries mostly, and they, it was interesting because one of the bookshelves you could slide it apart, and there was this hidden room in the back. And in that room, they did for a number of years, they did radio dramas. And I went to a number of them just because it was so much fun, to see them, and also to just to relive the nostalgia of my youth when I was listening to them all the time. But to actually be there, and watch them, do the sound effects and so forth, was interesting. And yeah, I mean, radio to me has always been and still is a primary form of entertainment. I you know I, Most people put the TV on at night. I put the radio on.
Do they still do that at that bookstore in Greenwich Village?
No, no, the bookstore closed, unfortunately. It was called Partners in Crime. It was a great little bookstore. Um, but yeah, unfortunately, like everything else, I mean, the village, chain, all the bookstores kind of left, and shoe stores came in, and I guess the landscape became too valuable. I mean, the land became too valuable, and I don't know what it turned into, but yeah, the books were gone.
That's such a cool thing, though. I would love to, if I had a time machine, if I could Marty McFly this, and,
Yeah.
and go back in time, I would love to do something like that and just see like this hidden room. It's almost like a speakeasy inside a bookstore, but for radio drama. That's so neat.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it was it just so fit in with the whole mystery theme type of thing, with this, you move the bookcases apart, the bookshelves apart, and there's this back room.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice. It was fun.
So you graduate college, you're teaching, you're writing every day. When does the first book come to you? When did that happen?
Well, yeah, let me say first, so I started writing every day, and it took me 6 years before I got my first short story published. And that was a grand day. And then I said to myself, "Oh my God, now I'm a writer. It's a smooth sailing from here on in." And then the next one got rejected. But so the novels came. So yeah, so for many years I wrote short stories, and they appeared in literary magazines and in some big major magazines like Playboy as well. And I did that for many years, and then but I always had in the back of my mind that the novel was the premier form of expression for me. That was the highest goal. So I would work on novels, and again, I think I wrote six that are still in my drawer that just never quite got to the level that I thought was publishable, and that publishers thought was publishable. And so the first one, I entered it, happened in a strange way. I went to a writers conference, and they had a series of books publishers there who had stalls, and I was standing at one end of the room, and I look across the room, and I see this man um, had a long black ponytail, and he had a black uh, jacket with a black shirt underneath, black pants and boots, kind of like a Johnny Cash type. And I said to myself, I think this man's going to like my work. So I walked across, and I introduced myself, and looked at some of the books his publishing company published. And I said, can I send you some stories? Because at that point, that's what I had to sell, really. And he said, sure. And I did. And he there was a kind of an international short story contest that he ran every year. And uh, I came in second the first year, and he said, well, apply again. Um, I'll waive the admission fee. So I sent them a bunch of stories the next year. I pulled out ones that I thought he didn't like as much, and put other ones in. So I won that contest the second year. And then actually, before that was published, I was working on a movie at the time. I had written, and I was directing a movie. And on one of my down days, I said, well, let me just send this a new novel to him. And he liked it. And so I've stayed with that, with that publishing company, ever since.
Oh wow. It's like some enchanted evening across a crowded room. You meet a Johnny Cash character, and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah,
occur.
no, it was yes. It's one of like it sounds like you made the story up, but actually happened. It was just, that moment's instinct and happening to be. It was the only, I think maybe it was one of two times that I have, they have it was it's called the Associated Writing Programs at AWP. It's a big literary conference every year. And they have it every year. I think I went twice, and that was one of
Yeah,
them.
that's fantastic. But there's this notion, I think some people have that, your first novel is the one that takes off, right? You sit down, you write the great American novel, and then success comes your way. For people who have, or of course now are established, but I think what most people don't realize is that sometimes it takes, 3, 4, 5 dusty manuscripts sitting in a drawer somewhere before something does take off. Um, and it sounds like that's your experience as well. I mean, you got to sort of develop that writing muscle, and timing has to work out. The story has to be right. I mean, a lot of stories have to align for something to get out into the world, pre self-publishing anyway.
Yeah, oh, I absolutely. And I can't remind my students enough because they all think, my fiction writing students, they all think, it's like I don't know. I think they think it's a matter of months, and everything is going to fall into place. And uh, yeah, so much is. You're right. I want to come back to that point you made about all a number of things that have to align to make the book work. Um, because I think I always thought of F. Scott Fitzgerald, where I thought for him everything aligned with The Great Gatsby. I mean, it's a kind of a perfect book, style, content. It just all came together, in a way that his other books, though interesting, I think never quite got to that perfect alignment of elements. And so I just wanted to emphasize that point that you made. I think it's true. And and what I tell my students is, you know, it's all in the learning process. So do I regret, having spent that time with those 6 books that never got anywhere? No. I mean, it got me to, I mean, we all have our different time uh, table, or the amount of time it takes us to mature as writers, and that was just mine. And I think it went into, ultimately to making me a better writer. So it's like the old cliche about, you have to fail in order to succeed.
That's
You
right.
fail times, and you've learned enough that then you can kind of do it in quotes right.
Yeah, I mean, we do learn most from our failures. That's, I think, true in writing, but true in so many other areas of our lives as well. But it's also, hey, you might spend a year or so working on a manuscript, and then an agent won't pick it up, or you fail to get interest from the right people on it. But that's not wasted time. That time you spend, it's like going to the gym. It's exercising that muscle. And maybe that time, maybe that story wasn't right for that time. But maybe you learn something that then brings you to another point of your life where something does hit. I mean, it's there's not the only recipe to success, I think, is just doing the work and just like taking another, getting back up at the plate and taking another whack at the ball.
Yes, absolutely. And I stress that, and I use that same image. It's like staying in shape. So even um, you know, even if things are not going well, if you're sitting at the desk, if you're writing, you're staying limber, you're staying ready for the day when the right ideas come, or when the right words come, and you can put it down. Um, and you never know when that's going to be, so you'll always have to be ready.
Got to be ready, and the competition is fierce out there. I mean, just getting and the publishing world is changing so much. I know traditional publishers are struggling because they're they're competing with mom and pops in the form of independent authors, and I'm not saying one is better than the other. I do think that there's a market for everything, but just finding an agent to represent you, I think is a huge roadblock to overcome if you do go that traditional route.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It is. Yes. And, I've had agents over the years um, in the days when I was publishing, in the commercial magazines and Playboy and places like that, I would say to my agent, I think this story should go to Playboy, and then he'd send it there. So it wasn't even that he was bringing a lot of creativity to it. It was just it was my time. This was in the 70s, I guess, and it was just my time, and my work was right for the time and right for those places, um, and then times I haven't had agents, and I've just had to work with independent publishers and do the work myself. So one way or another, you're right. The competition is fierce, and but that's just the way it is. I mean, to me, I've just grown accustomed to that. I mean, if you're saying, "Hey, look at me," um, you have to have something that's worth looking at, and as you said before, it has to be the right time. So timing is very important too. So once you get your work to a professional level of writing, then it's timing and subject matter and finding the right place, if there is a right place.
Yeah, it sounds almost like it's a full-time job.
It is a full-time job, and I've always been, even when I was teaching, I was like I had two full-time jobs.
Yeah.
When I was teaching full-time, I teach, now I teach, maybe one course at a time. But when I was teaching four courses, I still, I work 7 days. It's the kind of thing where it, in each case, in teaching and as well as in writing, I never thought of it as work. I just thought of it as, this is what I do and I enjoy it. It was just something that I liked doing. Um, so I mean, in some ways, I'm probably a workaholic, but it's not I don't think in a destructive way. I think it's actually in a constructive way that's kind of kept me energized and enthused and curious about life and all those things.
Sure. Did you keep any of those old Playboy magazines, the copies?
I do. I do. I have them. I put them in in a kind of a plastic bag that maybe a comforter would come in with a zip on it. So, so they're kind of airtight. Yeah, and I see on eBay, these old magazines are selling, and um, but yeah, I keep them. I mean, it's tucked away in the closet. I mean, every 10 years I might be digging around in the closet, and I say, oh yeah, I still have these things.
But you only read them for the articles, of course.
Yeah, right, of course. Yeah, and actually, in retrospect, they're pretty tame.
Yeah.
Um, uh, by today's standards.
Oh, forget about it. It's it's a G-rated movie, but by today's standards.
Yeah. It was pretty innocent when you think about it. But the good thing was that there were a lot of commercial magazines, both for men and women, that did publish fiction regularly, and that all went away.
Yeah, no, I remember. I mean, that was a thing back in the day, and so many of those magazines have gone away.
Oh yeah. Basically, and if they haven't, they've gone strictly nonfiction. All the women's magazines. I don't think there's any women's magazine now that publishes fiction. Where there might have been 8 or 9 back in the day that did, and they were good places to be and well-known writers. I mean, I was in Playboy with Nobel Prize winners who had stories. John Updike. I mean, very very big names. So it was a market that was very useful for writers and helpful for writers. And plus they paid, and they paid well.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but we moved on from there.
it's
We're,
it's
we're in a different time, and so much now. So many magazines are digital, which doesn't really give me the same kind of satisfaction that if I could hold something in my hand. Um, but that's where publishing has gone now, for the short fiction, for the most part,
yeah, yeah. Well, what can you share with us about Night and Its Longings?
Yeah, well, that was a book that I guess I started it before COVID, and COVID, for me, as it was for so many people, was such a downtime. I mean, it should have, it theoretically should have been a good time for a writer, because you have, there's nothing else, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do, and you've got all that extra time. But what happened to me is I all my new ideas, I had no new ideas. Everything dried up. But I did have this manuscript that I had started. And maybe even, I don't know, it may have started around 2016, early drafts of it. And so because I had no new ideas, I said, well, all right, let me go back and, we'll work on this. And this at least gives me something to do. And um, uh, and I thought I had, I thought it was a good idea, but for me, the layers or a book comes in layers, or in stages. So I had the writer living in Greenwich Village. I had uh, I don't know. I don't even know if I had the woman yet, who disappears. I certainly didn't have her backstory. Um, and the connection with the husband coming to him, the husband of this woman that he had an affair with, 10 years before, while she was married to this husband. Um, and the husband coming to him 10 years later, uh, saying she's disappeared, and would he help find her? The husband says, I think you're the key to her disappearance, because he indicates that the husband feels that his wife still loves Jake, the writer, even after all these years. So he gets drawn into that, and then other stages, came, about her past, and I mean, what happened to her in those 10 years, and her, the loss of her child, um, and the ways in which she matured and developed from the woman that he knew when he fell in love with her, and his own sense of not having really developed very much, that he was still pretty much in a holding pattern, in terms of romance, in terms of love. I mean, that he would have, he didn't, he never had a substantial relationship after that. So, so these things kind of came in layers, and finally, tracking her to the remote sections of the South Carolina beaches, and in particular an island off the coast of South Carolina. All that came in stages over, as look at that, it's probably over 6 or 7 years. Um, and then I still didn't feel it was right, and so I was always in the process of saying, okay, well, how can I? What is missing? That I knew something was missing, and what it finally turned out that I thought was missing, and what I finally think helped make the book, was just developing the style. Just a very taut, uh, tense style, where I tried to craft the sentences in a way that always had some kind of tension. And by tension, I'm not I'm not, I don't mean simply, obvious physical tension like a fist fight or, you know, a car chase or anything like that, but just the sense of that in each sentence, something is unresolved or missing or waiting to happen. Um, Various subtle ways that you can create, tension um, with a language and with sentences, uh, and then kind of finding this technique, which I you know I've always been a fan of noir books and movies. So the technique that they use in a lot of movies like Double Indemnity is just that voiceover, the voiceover of the main character. Kind of, I wanted that to be a driving force. The voice itself, the urgency in the voice, the need in the voice, the longing in the voice to find this, this woman he loved. I wanted that to be as strong as the actual events of the story. And then once I got that, I felt okay. Now the book is ready.
Yeah.
So it is a long process, and again, it's hard to impart that to other people and to your students who are young and anxious and think that the world is going to happen for them right away. Uh, but that's the reality of it was. Yeah, because I went one day I was looking back at there's an organization called the Mystery Writers of America, and the New York chapter would um, offers every year what they call a mentoring program, so that any of the members can submit uh, 50 pages, 50 pages of a book, and some other member in the organization will read it and comment on it and make suggestions. And so when I was looking back at some of the early work I did on the book, I see I submitted it. I think it was in 2016 to the mentoring project, and interestingly enough, the man who read it, the other writer who read it, happened to live in Greenwich Village, and he was able to point out a few, misdirections that I had, in terms of a street or where a cafe was. So yeah, so that was a long time. It was a long time brewing.
Do
Uh,
do do are you a plotter in the sense of or an outliner where you know exactly where the story's going, or does it unfold for you like it might unfold for the reader?
I am not a plotter. In a way, because I believe that plot is an extension of character. Um, so what my character's goal or action, or in this case, Jake finding this woman he loved, um, that dictates the plot. So what would he do to do that? And then, he would do this, and then he would try this, then he would go there, and then so thereby, you have a plot. And it's one of the things I teach is that don't worry about plot in advance. Let the plot unfold from what your characters are doing and what obstacles stand in the way of the character, of course. So plot is both the result of the steps the character takes to get what he wants and fate, because we know that you never know what fate is going to throw at us, and so it's those two things that really create the plot. So no, so to answer your question specifically, absolutely not. I usually have you know what I call an impulse, not even an idea, like oh yeah, I want to write about uh, this person or this place or something like that. And then I just, then start to create a scene in which I have a character doing something, struggling with something, usually something that's not right in his or her life. And starting there. And then I go day by day. Now, the farther along I get in the book, I'm jotting ideas down about, okay, well, maybe this could happen or maybe this will happen. But I do not at all plot in advance. Yeah, I I kind of like to discover the story, as I'm writing it, and I think the process of writing helps you discover the story. I mean, I've in the lectures I've given and conferences I've attended, I've met so many people who say, oh, I always wanted to write a book. And but it's I said, well, you got to get it out of your head. You
Yeah.
have to get, the way to start is to get something on paper, because if it's in your head, it's never going to get written. It's just not going to happen. And I really think that it's in the process of typing or writing that that your mind is, focused in a way that enables a story to unfold. So yeah. So no, I'm not. I remember John Irving. I heard him talk one time, and he said he can't write a book until he knows the exact last line, and then he writes. Then he starts writing toward that last line. But that's the exact opposite of the way I do it. I
Yeah.
don't know how the book is going to end, and I really don't want to know how it's going to end. I want to see how it's going to end. You
Yeah.
know.
Oh, but what does John Irving know about writing, though? I mean, come on.
Right.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I've tried it both ways, where I've like meticulously outlined something. I find that it's a faster writing process, but the story isn't as good. Um, my latest that my agent has now, I did it where I had an idea of what I wanted to write about, which was a character going through, struggling with the grief of the loss of his wife. But I didn't exactly know where it was going to go, where it was going to take him, and I found that it was a longer writing process. But number one, I had more fun with it because I was learning as I was going through it. But I think it just opened me up creatively to explore different avenues that I probably wouldn't have explored before had I tried to plot it out.
Yeah, yes, I agree, totally. I think it does. Um, if you plot it out, you're kind of saying, you're kind of, I don't know, putting a cage around the story. I mean, this is what this is what's going to happen. Well, maybe not. Because I think we write stories, on the two levels, with the conscious and the unconscious. And I think it's very important to allow the unconscious to play into the story. And it will, if you don't have it all plotted out.
Yeah.
Because in that way it's predetermined. But if you allow the unconscious to be working as you're writing it, it's feeding you things and pointing you in directions that you might not originally, or you probably did not originally think of. Um, I have this very strange theory, which is unprovable, but I feel that the stories are already written inside of us. It's just that we're kind of opening the door and letting it come out. Um, uh, but again, it's a theory, and it's not something that I can certainly prove. But you know, but it justifies my thinking that um, the unconscious is allowed greater freedom if you don't don't put a boundary around it by planning it out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
um,
I agree. I've heard of authors, talking about like channeling works, like kind of coming from, not really knowing where the words come from, but just really letting their subconscious just kind of go out there and write it. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it, but I certainly have heard of that happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, because let's face it, we can't really explain. Okay, well, why did these words come to us at this moment? Why did this idea suddenly, come to us? Why, we don't know. I mean, it's the result of all of our experience and you know and the fact that we're sitting down, at the typewriter or at the computer, and we're forcing our mind to think about a certain thing, but but who can explain, why things come up when they do, and the words that come along with them. That's why I think so much of it is coming out from the unconscious. Um, uh, so that we have a conscious, we have some kind of a conscious idea that we're following, but then it's the unconscious that's feeding, or enhancing that, or nourishing that, so that it fills out. So why do we suddenly think, okay, well, we're in this room, and so the room should have X, X, and X details? Well, that just pops into our head, right? I mean, um, maybe it's based on a real room, but maybe it's not. Um, but that information or those details are popping into our head. They got to be coming from the unconscious. It's like I don't know. I don't want to make it sound mystical, because I don't think it's mystical. I think it really just is a combination of the conscious and the unconscious mind working together.
Yeah.
Produce to produce a work that is dynamic in the sense of that it's evolving and changing and lively. Um, Whereas, yeah, I remember talking to a science fiction writer, novelist one time, and he said he had every single chapter plotted out in advance. This is exactly what's going to happen. And maybe for a very, extremely plot reliant story, maybe that works. I'm not saying it doesn't. I think whatever works for the writer should do. And everybody's different. So, I'm not opposed to that. It's just alien to me.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You mentioned something about working on a film. What was the film that you were working on at the time?
Yeah, well, I had written a play called Love in the Age of Dion, and it was set in the Bronx, in a neighborhood where uh, Dion of Dion and the Belmonts, a pop star in the 60s, 50s and 60s, lived. And it wasn't about him, but I just used that as the kind of the setting in the background. So I wrote a play, and it was produced and played at an Equity Theater in the Bronx, and ran for almost 9 months. And uh, I had several producers interested in it and moving it into Manhattan, and 9/11 occurred. And in the case of my strongest producer, the most likely one, she lived in Lower Manhattan. So, I mean, literally, she had to leave. I mean, the smoke and so she left. She basically left the city and retired. So, um, we thought about it, and we said, well, we may as well make a movie, because it's going to cost just as much to put it on off Broadway as it would, to do it as a movie. So I had another producer, and then he dropped out. So then, but I was too far in at this point, and I liked the script. So I just uh, formed the company, and my company produced it. And um, yeah, it played a lot. It played and won a lot of awards in film festivals. Um, and and I show, it's shown from time to time at either a conference, or usually a special event of some sort. I mean, in the fall, um, in September, I'm going to, the Westchester Italian Cultural Center in Tuckahoe is going to present it. Um, so it plays, uh, it doesn't play commercially in theaters at this point, um, but it does play occasionally. And it was great. It was great doing it. I always wanted to do a movie. I mean, I kind of satisfied the need to do a movie. I don't I don't feel a need to do another one. I mean, it's very stressful. 17 days of shooting were extremely stressful, but it was just so satisfying. I remember the day of the last shoot. We were battling a storm that was coming in, and we had to get everything shot, finished. Wind was blowing, the sky was darkening, but we got the shoot in, and that was our basic uh, photography. Uh, and I went to dinner with my sister and my brother-in-law who worked on the film with me. And I just remember sitting there feeling this, incredible sense of satisfaction at having done it. It was like, just like a challenge, something that you never thought you would do. And it was always in the back of your mind, but it never seemed realistic as a possibility. And then, and we got it done. So yeah, that was good. And the first film festival I played at on Long Island, it won best feature film.
Oh,
So
that's great.
yeah. So we were pleased with that. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I
And
have to.
I still do write plays. I have a play. I have a one-act play coming up in the Chain Film Festival in New York City off Broadway in August, and I still do write plays. Not as much as I write fiction, but I think I like the interplay of the two different forms, and I think I've learned a lot from um, uh, the acting and playwriting classes that I've taken that have helped my writing, in fiction and vice versa.
No, sure. I mean, and I also imagine that just watching and hearing somebody perform your words helps you fine tune what those words are,
Absolutely.
and you get, I'm sure, a sense of satisfaction seeing an audience react to what you've written, versus when somebody's reading your book, you're not there next to them, watching them read it and getting a reaction. You got to wait for reviews and all of that. But hearing the reaction of an audience, I imagine, must be satisfying much
Oh
of the
yeah,
time.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right, and that's one of the reasons I like it, and that's the huge difference. Yeah, the response to a book, you read a review or something, or if it's somebody you know, makes more specific comments about it, but otherwise it's a very distant process. But yeah, as you say, it's just immediate. I mean, I the uh, when the play was uh, produced in the Bronx, and the plays now that in these uh, uh, film play festivals, one act play festivals that the Chain Theater in Manhattan runs. Yeah, I go to every performance because it's such a different sensation to hear, what people are laughing at, or how people are responding, and you can kind of feel it physically in the theater. You know whether people are engrossed in what's going on stage or not. You can feel, there's a certain silence and an anticipatory silence that's different than a normal silence in a theater when the audience is enraptured by what's going on. So it's yeah, and yeah, it's one of the reasons why I do it, and because it's a collaborative uh, effort. Whereas your writing is basically you and your editor or whatever, but in the theater, you've got sound people, you've got light people, you've got director, you've got all kinds of, and you've got the actors.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot going on that, in terms of interaction between people, and everybody's contributing something to it, to the final product. So in terms of the fiction, it's great because okay, you're the king and lord. But in the theater, it's more collaborative, but they're each satisfying in different ways.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Philip, where can people buy Night and Its Longings?
Yeah, any bookstore, you can order it at any bookstore, and I encourage you to use your favorite bookstore to help keep them in business. Um, Certainly at online at Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com. Yeah, it's readily available.
And Philip, if you could go back in time and whisper some words of advice into the younger Philip's ear, Maybe it's that younger Philip who's listening to those radio dramas. What would you tell your younger self? What kind of advice would you give your younger self?
I don't know. I didn't know it at the time, but I guess I would say, just keep doing what you're doing. You're building up, you know, uh, an arsenal of information and sensation and emotion, um, by listening to drama, by reading, which I did a lot of as a child and still do. Um, um, I guess we go through life not really thinking, oh, this is the best thing I could be doing now, or this is a good thing I'm doing, or you just take what's going on as, okay, we don't know anything else. So, yeah, and then later you realize, well, those are really good days, or those are really good things that I did. And I didn't fully appreciate that at the time. But I was, I guess I would just say, have more confidence that, this will help you in the long run. Kind of stuff that, we're all always looking for confidence and, ways of, feeling more confident about our lives.
Did you keep any of those cowboy stories that you were writing when you were 10 years old?
Yeah, I do. I have some of them. I do have some of them. Yeah, they were stock kind of, stock Western plots, the good guy hunting the bad guy. And yeah, I look at them from time to time. Yeah, it's quite amusing.
Very good. Well, Philip, thank you for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for having me.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.